In this video, we're going to talk about the block and inline HTML elements. So there are two main types of HTML elements. One is block element and second is inline element. And there's often a lot of confusion with people as to what these are and how to define their CSS properties of box model. So this video will help you clear all those doubts, and I'm very confident by the end of this video you'll be very comfortable with working with block and inline elements, and you will never have to worry about it ever again. So let's take an example of the browser. How does browser render all these HTML elements? So if you notice, if you hover over each of these elements, like the h1, h2, the p tag, the a tag. So if you notice, all of these elements are treated as uh, you know uh, the rectangles or the blocks, so by the browser. All right, so what are these block and inline elements? So block elements are the same height as content contained between the tags. Okay, so what I've done is I've gone to the jsfiddle.net. This is basically will allow you to see your CSS runtime at the same page. Okay, so I've declared a div inside of which I have two elements, p tags, and then I have three a tags elements. Okay, so what I've done over here, I've given background to each one of them. So I've given background of gray color to the div. I've given the p tags the background of green color with the color of white, with a padding of 10 pixels. Okay, and the a tags I've given the background of violet and padding of 10 pixels. Okay, so what this means is that block elements are the same heights as the content contained between the tags. Okay, so block elements basically are the divs, p's, for example, p tags, h1 tags, and inline elements are, for example, a tags, span tags. Okay, so the best way to find which are the block and which are the inline elements is either to hover over them when you open the page source. Okay, inspect element. If you hover over h1, you can see that if it is containing, if it's taking the width of the entire content, that means that it is the block level element. And in case, for example, this a tag, this one, this a tag, if it is not taking the width of the entire content, then it is the um, inline level element. Okay, so block elements are the same height as the content contained between the tags. So if you notice over here, this is the same height as the content contained between the tags. For now, let's just take off the padding. We don't need them. Okay, and they take the entire width of the container. So you can see that it's taking the entire width of the container. Yeah, and inline elements are the same height and width of their content. So their height and their width is the same as the content. Okay, so they don't take the entire width, they just take the same width as the content. Inner elements align left in a line side by side on the same line, not on new lines. Okay, so the block level elements, they will start on a new line. So because the first elements, so for example, these are two block level elements, two p tags, this is taking the entire width of the content, the container, sorry. Hence you cannot have another element adjusted over here, hence they are starting on new line. But the inline level element, they start on this same line and they align left to each other. Okay, they align starting from left. Okay, so they don't start on the new line. Okay, and block level element can wrap other block and inline elements. So if div is the block level element, it can wrap other block level or inline element, but the inline element, they can nest only other inline elements except the a tag. Okay, so this is basically just saying the height is equal to the width of the content. Height is the same as the content. Okay, and the width is 100% of the container, and height and width is equal to content. Okay, So for example, if we want to set the padding for these, we can set the padding. So we can see we can set the padding to both these elements. So this is my, the p tag is my uh, block level element, and the a tag is the inline element. So if you want to set padding, you can set padding, no problem. But if you want to set the width and the height, let's say I want to set it to 200 pixels as width, and height I'll set it to 50. Okay, so the height and width has been set for the block level element. Let's say if you want to do the same for the inline element, and let's see if that works. If you notice, nothing is happening. Yeah, okay. So it is not, the inline element will not allow you to set the width and height properties. If you want to do that, then you need to declare this as either block level element. So if you declare block, you can see that it is taking, so it is actually going to get converted into a block level element, and then you can give the height and width properties. You can set the height and width of the inline element, because then it'll work as a block level element. Or if you want, you can just make it inline block, and if you do that, then it will work both as the inline level element as well as the block level element. So now you can see that you're able to set the width and height of the inline element once you've declared the display property as inline block. So it will inherit both properties of block as well as inline element, and that's when it will start working. Okay, and next thing is the margin. Okay, so if I want to give margin to my block level element to 10 pixels, let's see if that works. And sure enough, it is working. The margin is basically the outer area of the element. Okay, and padding is basically the element area inside. So padding basically adjusts the space inside of the element, and the margin controls the space around the outside of the element. Okay, so padding is basically the space inside of the element, and margin is the space outside of the element. Okay, so as you can see, we are able to set the margin. As you can see, there is a margin of 10 pixel across all the sides, which is top, right, bottom, and left. Okay, and let's try to give the margin to, let's remove this inline block, and width and height for some time for both of these. So let's give the margin 10 pixels for our inline element as well. If you notice, the margin right and left is working, but the margin top and bottom is not working for the inline element. The reason being is because the inline elements don't push the elements on the top and on the bottom of them. So in order for us to do that, again, we have to do the same thing, which is set the display property as inline block. And if we do that, sure enough, we can see that we've got the margin of 10 pixels at the top and the bottom as well. Okay, great. So just to recap on the um, block and inline element, block element have the same height as the content contained between the tags. Okay, and they take the 100% width of the container. So you can see 100% width of the container. Okay, and they start on a new line. So you can see they are starting on a new line. Yeah, block elements can wrap other block and inline elements. Okay, most HTML elements are block level. For example, div, p, and h1. If you ever want to see which elements are block and which are inline, you can always go and hover over those elements. If they are taking the full width of the container, that means they are the block element, and if they are not, then it's the inline element. Otherwise, you can just define a background to them, and you can see that the background is being defined for the entire width of the container. So hence it is the block level element, and over here it's only to the width of the element. Hence this is the inline element. Okay. um, Inline element are the same height and width of the container, so you can see that this is the same height and width of the container. Inline elements align left and line side by side on the same line, so you can see it's aligned left and they are on the same line, unlike the block level elements. Inline element don't push the elements above and below them vertically. When margin is added to them, they only push the elements horizontally. So if you want to add the margin top and margin bottom to work, then set the property to display block or display inline block, which is what we've done over here, in order for us to uh, for the inline element to have the margin top and margin bottom property applied. Inline element can only nest other inline elements. Okay, so I think that's about it. I hope it is clear. If you have any questions, you can always leave a comment. I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.